Hello, and welcome to this session on persuasive PR writing. I'm Tim Penning, a professor at Grand Valley State University in Michigan. The information for this presentation comes from the book Corporate Communications Writing, which is available as an ebook or hard copy from Amazon, Apple, or Barnes & Noble. So the thing to consider with persuasive writing is that you need a strategy to be persuasive. You can't just put the information out there and think you're going to persuade people. And to be strategic, you need theory. A great source for strategy is theory. And the theory must be understood to be applied. So we're going to look at 4 persuasion theories in particular: social judgment theory, cognitive dissonance, reasoned action theory, and elaboration likelihood model. Each of them will give you strategies to write more persuasively. First up is social judgment theory. In social judgment theory, basically, messages produce change through judgmental processes and effects. In other words, your audience will make judgments using social norms theory that will determine whether they are persuaded by you or not. They'll not just think of your message, but other people around them, in other words. The effect of persuasive communication depends on how they evaluate the position advocated by a message. One principle of SJT is latitudes. What this basically means is there are different positions that are potential on each issue. And a people's attitude is based on their assessment of that position that you write relative to other positions that are out there. And their assessment falls into latitudes or ranges. It's not just whether they agree or disagree. There's a latitude of acceptance, which is a range of positions that they see as acceptable, and the opposite, a latitude of rejection, a range of positions on an issue that they see as unacceptable. A good example to look at this is immigration as an issue. There are 4 potential ways that you could position this issue. You could say immigration needs to be easy. We need to make the process more clear. We need to make everybody who's already in the country citizens, or we need to arrest and deport everybody not here legally. And you can see where these different positions fall within a range of acceptance or rejection, closer to full acceptance, but number 1 might just be in the range, or closer to full rejection, and number 3 might be in the range. Ego involvement is another aspect of social judgment theory. It's when a person's stand on an issue is central to their sense of identity or self or their ego. As their ego involvement with an issue increases, the size of the latitude of rejection also increases. Thus, the size of the latitude of acceptance and non-commitment decrease. What this means is the more a person is involved with the issue you're writing about, the harder they'll be to persuade. And then we have assimilation and contrast effects. Basically, this means in an assimilation effect, a person perceives the message to be advocating a position closer to their own than it really does. Or they perceive a message to be advocating a position farther from their own than it actually does. That would be the contrast effect. A message perceived in the latitude of acceptance is more likely to be assimilated. A message perceived in the attitude of rejection is more likely to be contrasted. So people will move the ball closer to them based on where you land, in which range you land in. Therefore, clear messages are important because they're less susceptible to assimilation and contrast. Now, attitude change happens in social judgment theory based on the latitude of acceptance. It's more likely to produce the intended attitude change. Messages that fall in the latitude of rejection produce no attitude change, or even a boomerang effect where you actually bolster their current attitude you're trying to change. So, application of this theory: first, don't present your position in isolation. Be mindful of the fact that there are other arguments out there your reader may be aware of, and they might already be aligned with one of those. So don't try to persuade to a fixed position. a black or white argument, present ideas within a range of acceptance, and appeal to their ego involvement or their sense of identity or self to relate what you're trying to persuade them to their own personal preferences, and write clearly to avoid those assimilation or contrast effects. The next theory is cognitive dissonance theory. People seek to maximize internal psychological consistency. They want to avoid what's called cognitive pain, and therefore they try to resolve the quote-unquote problem of two opposing ideas in their mind at the same time. In other words, if they believe A and you say, no, it's B, they have to reject one of those or it's upsetting to them mentally. Now, the magnitude of dissonance or size of this problem is affected by how much argument is out there, the proportion of consonant and inconsonant elements. In other words, how big are the things that are consistent with what they already believe and how much of them are different? And also the importance of the elements or the issue. So like the other theory, if an issue is important to a person, it's harder for them to have two opposing ideas. If they don't really care about it, they can accept opposing ideas in their mind and not be bothered. Now, people try to reduce dissonance by re-evaluating alternatives, different positions, and looking at them again, or they will selectively seek information to confirm their opinion that they already had. Or they'll just ignore or minimize as unimportant or unpersuasive messages that are contrary to what they already believe. We've all seen that in interpersonal relationships. It happens with writing too. Therefore, ongoing communication is important to reaffirm persuasion. Induced compliance or incentives to try to get people to change their perspective can lead to only temporary persuasion. So it's important to be mindful of that. Making explicit a person's hypocrisy, meanwhile, can arouse dissonance and lead to attitude, behavior, or change. What that means is you point out to people that what they say they believe and what they do are not the same thing. And you point that out in a message in a way that is not threatening. It may encourage them to act in accordance with what their stated beliefs are. But it could also change their attitude to be consistent with their behavior. So instead of changing their behavior, they just change their mind and say, no, I actually like my behavior. So application here is, in your writing, encourage people to reevaluate their current position on an equal plane with the new persuasive message you're sending them, to evaluate them equally. Reaffirm their positive attitudes. Expose their inconsistency of thought and action to try to get them to resolve the cognitive dissonance in a way that means they'll accept your persuasive message. Or appeal to personal relevance and the importance of the issue to get them to take it seriously and therefore think harder about it and change. The next theory is reasoned action theory. And here, behavioral intention is a key concept. A lot of people intend to do a thing, but they don't, and so we need to move them off the proverbial fence. So 4 factors influence this. One is their attitude toward the behavior. Do they think it would be a good thing to behave this way or not? Another is the injunctive norm. People will do what important others want them to do. If people who are important to them, a spouse, friends, coworkers, want them to do, it's more likely they'll adopt that behavior. Or if they see other people doing this, especially people similar to them, they might be convinced to do the same thing. And then number 4, perceived behavioral control. Do they feel that they can do this? Can they control their behavior? Can they achieve this? This is also called self-efficacy. So how do you apply reasoned action theory to your writing? When it comes to their attitude toward the behavior, encourage them to reevaluate their existing beliefs about the behavior. Get them to see this as a positive thing for them personally, not just what you want them to do. With regard to the injunctive norm, refer to those influential others. Your parents want you to do this. Your coworkers will see you this way. Your spouse will appreciate this, and that sort of thing. The descriptive norm means you should make obvious the fact that others are doing this. It could be a single anecdote or a statistical number. So a testimonial or a statement that 75% of Americans are already doing this. And then finally, with self-efficacy, write in a way that diminishes what the reader might perceive to be obstacles to doing the behavior. You encourage mental rehearsal of doing the behavior, or you provide examples of role models or persons like them doing this behavior themselves. The trans-theoretical model puts together several theories and offers stages by which people move through in order to be persuaded. It says there are 5 stages in particular. This graphic shows the flow that people go through from one stage to another: pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning, action, and maintenance. And we'll go over each of these and what they mean briefly on the next slide. Pre-contemplation means the person's not even considering changing their behavior the way you want to persuade them. Contemplation means the person is thinking about the possibility of behavior change. Planning means they're making preparations to actually change their behavior. The action stage, of course, that's when they've completed this behavior change, or attitude change, by the way. And the maintenance stage is they continue this new behavior or this new way of thinking. Now, people have what's called a decisional balance. As they go through stages, the pros outweigh the cons as they move through the process. It's cumulative. Self-efficacy assessment is different at each stage. So we need messages that encourage that people are able to do what you're trying to persuade them to do. And these are more effective at later stages. So the application to writing more persuasively can be seen in a table. At each stage, the writing strategy is different. At the pre-contemplation stage, persuasive won't make any sense, so you focus on awareness of the idea or action. At the contemplation stage, it's about encouraging them about their ability to act, the "you can do this" message. At the planning stage, the encouragement continues and you get them to envision success, to get them to actually take that intended change. At the action stage, it's congratulations and celebration to reinforce that they've done this. And finally, at the maintenance stage, writing should affirm and remind people to keep that opinion or behavior going. The elaboration likelihood model is the final theory we're going to talk about. And basically what this means is that being persuaded is affected by how hard someone thinks about an issue. Elaboration is a term that means issue-relevant thinking, how hard they think about something. And it's important to note that this is not either or, it's on a scale, how much they. And in ELM, there are 2 routes of thinking, or paths to persuasion. The central route is where people are thinking very hard about something directly. Their elaboration is high. And that means that the message is the most important aspect, the actual message. Meanwhile, the peripheral route, people are thinking indirectly about something, and elaboration is low. They might be multitasking, or the issue isn't really important to them, and therefore peripheral cues or cognitive shortcuts are important. One example is the source of the message. How do you motivate people to elaborate or think more about your message? Stress the relevance of the issue to whoever is getting the message. Appeal to their need for cognition or the fact that some people enjoy thinking about things or see themselves as intelligent. Eliminate distractions from competing messages, not just alternative points of view on this issue, but anything that gets their attention. And acknowledge that they have prior knowledge on the issue and appeal to that and encourage them to know more. The application with elaboration likelihood model, therefore, is for high elaboration or central route participants, people who are really thinking hard about things. A strong argument is the key. You really have to bring your A game to persuade people. If people are in low elaboration mode or a peripheral route thinking, you use peripheral cues or heuristics. And these include the following: the credibility of the source, if the source is a likable person, if majority opinion is the same as the position advocated, bring that up. That might persuade them more than the full argument. The number of arguments made or the length of the message could be a factor in whether or not a person is persuaded. They might look at a lengthy message and say, wow, that's really significant. That must be believable. So in conclusion, to be a persuasive writer, know your audience in terms of their current thought and behavior. Then know the theory of how people are persuaded to change their mind or their action and behavior. And then write with a strategy derived from theory in order to be more likely to persuade your audience.